The 1980s were a wild decade when animation was bold, brash, and unfiltered. Studios took risks pushing boundaries that modern audiences might find shocking. Violence, corporate greed, and twisted humor slipped into shows meant for kids. But many of these cartoons vanished without a trace erased by changing values and stricter networks. Tonight, we uncovered more forgotten 80s cartoons that would never air today. Number 12. Turbo Teen, 1984. When Turbo Teen first hit television, it seemed like a wild idea, even for the 80s. A teenage boy who could morph into a sports car after being splashed with water. It was meant to blend sci-fi adventure and teenage wish fulfillment, but what audiences got was something both bizarre and unsettling. The transformation sequences were strangely graphic. His body twisted, stretched, and reshaped into metal in ways that felt more like horror than heroism. The show was produced during a time when networks wanted edgy ideas to compete with live-action hits like Knight Rider. Yet Turbo Teen quickly gained notoriety for its awkward tone. Parents were disturbed by the implication of a boy physically turning into a machine. Critics called it one of the strangest concepts ever aired for children. Behind the scenes, animators struggled to balance the absurd premise with limited budgets. The transformation scenes were recycled constantly to save costs. Some animators later admitted they were embarrassed by the show's weird undertones. By 1985, it was gone. But in the decades since Turbo Teen has gained cult status online precisely because of how odd it was. Clips circulate as memes and nostalgic curiosities. It remains a perfect symbol of 80s excess where imagination ran wild and no idea was too strange to animate. Number 11. Rude Dog and the Dweebs, 1989. In an era defined by corporate mascots, Rude Dog and the Dweebs was both a product and a parody of consumerism. Based on a clothing brand logo, the show followed a neon-colored dog with an attitude problem and his band of misfit mutts. The animation was loud, brash, and coated in the fluorescent madness of the late 80s. Yet what made it controversial was its message or lack of one. Rude Dog was rude indeed, often mocking authority, bullying his friends, and showing open disdain for adults. Parents groups quickly accused the show of glamorizing bad behavior and promoting rebellion for rebellion's sake. Censors were alarmed by the slang, heavy dialogue, and chaotic humor. Networks began trimming scenes that showed disrespect toward teachers and police figures. Behind the scenes, the creators defended it as satire, but advertisers grew nervous. By 1990, it was quietly canceled. For years, it disappeared from reruns and home video. Only bootleg tapes kept it alive. In retrospect, Rude Dog and the Dweebs represents a moment when marketing and art collided, creating something too cynical for children, yet too juvenile for adults. It is remembered now as a fluorescent relic of a time when attitude sold everything, even animation. Number 10. Inhumanoids, 1986. Inhumanoids was a dark fever dream disguised as a toy commercial. Produced by Sunbow, the same studio behind G.I. Joe and Transformers, it was an animated horror show for kids. The story centered on scientists battling gigantic subterranean monsters that looked like creatures from an R-rated movie. Bones, melted faces rotted, and the earth itself screamed. Parents were horrified. Complaints flooded networks about nightmares and traumatized children. Some stations pulled the series mid-run, while others relegated it to early morning hours where few would see it. The Federal Communications Commission even received letters accusing the show of psychological harm. Behind the scenes, Hasbro pushed the limits, hoping to sell monster toys to older boys. But animators knew they had gone too far. Storyboards showed skeletons writhing in agony, and people being swallowed alive by molten creatures. Despite incredible artwork, the show's tone was relentlessly grim. By the late 80s, it vanished entirely, but collectors still whisper about Inhumanoids as the darkest cartoon ever marketed to kids. Its influence can be seen in later horror animations and adult series. It serves as a haunting reminder that even children's television once dared to terrify. Number 9. Rubik, the Amazing Cube, 1983. At first glance, Rubik, the amazing cube, seemed harmless enough, a Saturday morning cartoon based on the wildly popular puzzle toy. Yet this show became one of the strangest and most unintentionally creepy creations of the decade. The story followed three Latino siblings who discover a sentient Rubik's Cube that can speak, float, and perform magic when solved. His face appeared on the puzzle's surface, twisting and turning while talking in a high-pitched voice that unnerved many viewers. What was meant to be cute quickly became unsettling. Critics questioned why a toy meant to teach logic was turned into a magical creature solving every human problem with sparkly beams. Parents complained that the show encouraged superstition over intelligence. Educators slammed it for dumbing down math and science while wrapping it in sugary moral lessons. Behind the scenes, the network demanded constant product placement and cross-promotion with the Real Cube brand. The creators grew frustrated at being forced to build full episodes around toy marketing. The animation team was also rushed, resulting in frequent errors and looping dialogue. After one short season, the show disappeared. Today, it survives mostly as online clips shared by retro enthusiasts who cannot believe it was real. Rubik, the amazing cube, stands as a surreal example of how greed and pop culture collided in the 80s, leaving behind something both colorful and bizarrely eerie. Number 8. The Gary Coleman Show, 1982. By the early 80s, Gary Coleman was one of the most famous child stars on Earth thanks to his sitcom success. NBC capitalized on that fame with an animated series where Coleman voiced himself as a guardian angel sent from heaven to help troubled kids. The concept should have been heartwarming, but instead it became one of the decade's most awkward misfires. The show's tone was a confusing blend of moral preaching and slapstick comedy. Coleman's angel character would lecture children about lying, stealing, or cheating, and then defeat demons in cartoonish fashion. But critics noticed that the scripts were filled with questionable depictions of punishment and sin. Some scenes even bordered on disturbing, as the angel used supernatural force against bullies and villains. Religious groups accused the show of trivializing faith, turning divine intervention into cheap entertainment. Meanwhile, secular audiences found it overly preachy. NBC tried to rebrand it mid-season, but ratings collapsed. Behind the scenes, animators struggled to make the character designs consistent. Coleman himself grew uncomfortable with the direction and later distanced himself from it. The show was quietly pulled and never re-aired. Today, it is remembered as a cautionary tale of celebrity exploitation. The Gary Coleman Show shows how even good intentions can twist into something unsettling when Hollywood tries to commercialize morality. Number 7. Kid Video, 1984. Kid Video was one of the most ambitious Saturday morning experiments of its time. It mixed live action and animation in a story about a teenage rock band kidnapped into a surreal cartoon universe ruled by a villain called Master Blaster. The concept was bold, but the execution bordered on psychedelic chaos. The series was filled with flashing neon lights, music videos, and MTV-style editing that left some parents complaining of sensory overload. The characters spoke in slang-heavy dialogue and constantly broke the fourth wall. Networks billed it as cutting-edge, but the effect was dizzying. Behind the scenes, the production was a logistical nightmare. The live-action segments were filmed in California, while the animation was outsourced overseas. Coordinating the transitions was expensive and plagued by delays. Some episodes were rewritten entirely when the band's real-world music deals fell apart. Critics were divided. Some called it a creative triumph, while others labeled it a mind-melting mess. Religious groups protested its themes of kids trapped in fantasy worlds, manipulated by technology, calling it a metaphor for moral corruption. By 1986, it was gone, leaving behind only its catchy theme song. Decades later, Kid Video became a cult curiosity on the internet, a reflection of a time when music television and cartoons collided in a Technicolor fever dream. Number 6. Chuck Norris Karate Commandos, 1986. In the mid-'80s, networks were obsessed with turning real-life celebrities into cartoon heroes. That obsession reached its most extreme form with Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. It followed the martial arts icon leading a team of commandos against a terrorist organization called the Claw. Every episode opened with live-action footage of Norris himself delivering a moral lesson before launching into a barrage of animated violence. The cartoon was intended to inspire discipline and courage, but parents saw something else. Despite the positive messages, each episode featured explosions, brutal fistfights, and scenes of near-death peril. It blurred the line between heroism and aggression in ways that alarmed watchdog groups. Behind the scenes, the production moved at lightning speed to capitalize on Norris's fame. Writers reused storylines from action movies, while animators recycled battle sequences to meet weekly deadlines. Some insiders later admitted the goal was less about storytelling and more about selling toys and lunchboxes. Controversy erupted when educators claimed children were mimicking the show's combat scenes in schoolyards. Several local stations pulled it from rotation, citing safety concerns. By the end of 1986, the show had vanished after only a handful of episodes. Today, Chuck Norris Karate Commandos lives on as a pop culture relic. Its mix of moral preaching and excessive violence makes it almost unimaginable for modern children's television. It stands as a symbol of an era when heroes were larger than life and subtlety was left in the dust. Number 5. Rambo, The Force of Freedom, 1986. Turning a violent R-rated movie into a children's cartoon seemed impossible, yet that is exactly what happened with Rambo, The Force of Freedom. The show transformed the traumatized Vietnam veteran from the films into a clean-cut hero who fought cartoon villains around the world. Every episode ended with a lesson about bravery and teamwork, but the content in between was anything but gentle. Explosions, gunfire, and military operations dominated the series. Critics were stunned that a franchise known for bloodshed was being marketed to children. Parent groups accused the producers of sanitizing war and glorifying violence. Some countries even refused to air it, fearing it promoted militarism. Behind the scenes, the team struggled to tone down the brutality while keeping Rambo recognizable. Hasbro planned a toy line that included assault vehicles and weapons designed for kids. The absurdity of it all made headlines. Even Stallone himself reportedly found the concept strange. Ratings were strong at first, but network pressure and censorship notes piled up. Scenes were re-edited to remove anything remotely resembling death. The end result pleased no one. Kids found it boring, while adults found it inappropriate. By 1987, it was gone. Yet the show remains a fascinating relic of 80s extremes where Hollywood tried to make war family friendly. Today, it feels like a fever dream proof that the decade's logic was sometimes stranger than fiction. Number 4. Toxic Crusaders, 1991, but born from 80s culture. While technically airing in the early 90s, Toxic Crusaders was the direct product of late 80s excess. It was a bizarre attempt to turn the ultra-violent cult movie, The Toxic Avenger, into a Saturday morning environmental comedy. The result was an unforgettable mutation of good intentions and grotesque imagery. The series followed a janitor transformed by toxic waste into a hideously deformed superhero. Along with other radioactive misfits, he fought polluters and corrupt corporations. On paper, it was an eco-friendly message. On screen, it was nightmare fuel. The animation was bright but filled with oozing sludge mutant limbs and grotesque villains. Parents complained about the disturbing visuals and crude humor. Environmental groups were split, some praising its message, while others accused it of trivializing pollution. Behind the scenes, writers struggled to balance slapstick and satire. The studio hoped to create a moral superhero for a new decade, but the characters were too ugly and bizarre for mainstream audiences. Toy sales were disappointing, and the cartoon was canceled after one season. In hindsight, Toxic Crusaders predicted the growing tension between activism and entertainment. It tried to make ecology exciting and ended up creating one of the strangest children's shows ever conceived. Today, it stands as proof that even noble messages can mutate when filtered through the neon chaos of 80s culture. Number 3. Mr. T, 1983. At the height of his fame after the A-Team, Mr. T became more than an actor, he was a brand. NBC seized that image and turned it into Mr. T, the animated series that blended morality tales with Saturday morning spectacle. It followed a group of teenage gymnasts traveling the world solving crimes and learning life lessons under the guidance of their coach, Mr. T himself. On paper, it was uplifting. In practice, it was chaotic. Each episode opened with a live action, Mr. T preaching values about courage and honesty. But what followed were absurd adventures involving kidnappings, explosions, and bizarre villains. The tone was oddly dark for a children's show. Critics were divided. Some praised its diversity and positive messaging, while others accused it of glorifying violence. Parents complained that Mr. T's tough love approach bordered on intimidation. The show was even criticized for stereotyping urban youth through exaggerated slang and caricatures. Behind the scenes, production was rushed. Scripts were often rewritten overnight to include more action and moral lessons. NBC executives demanded that every episode end with a quotable life rule delivered by Mr. T himself. Animators later admitted it felt more like propaganda than storytelling. By 1986, the series quietly ended, but its legacy lingers as one of the strangest mixtures of celebrity branding and children's television ever made. Mr. T remains unforgettable, a symbol of the decade's belief that anything, even moral education, could be turned into high-octane entertainment. Number 2. Brave Star, 1987. Set on the distant planet of New Texas, Brave Star was one of the most ambitious animated series of the 80s. It blended science fiction westerns and Native American mythology into a single, neon-drenched adventure. The hero, Marshall Brave Star, was a lawman with mystical powers drawn from spirit animals, allowing him to fight outlaws and aliens alike. At first, critics praised its creativity and strong moral lessons, but controversy soon followed. Native groups protested its stereotypical portrayal of indigenous culture, while others accused it of cultural appropriation. Despite good intentions, the show's depiction of spiritual powers and tribal imagery felt exploitative. Parents were also shocked by its unusually grim tone. One episode addressed drug addiction, showing a young character dying from substance abuse, an unprecedented move for a children's cartoon. Networks received floods of complaints, and some stations refused to re-air the episode. Behind the scenes, Filmation, the studio behind He-Man, poured massive resources into Brave Star, hoping to launch a new toy empire, but its darker stories and ethical complexity confused its audience. Merchandise failed to sell, and the show ended abruptly. In hindsight, Brave Star was ahead of its time, a daring attempt to teach empathy and justice through fantasy. But its blend of mysticism and moral realism would never survive today's cautious network standards. It remains a haunting testament to how far 80s cartoons once dared to go. Number 1. Bionic 6, 1987. Bionic 6 was the ultimate hybrid of family sitcom and science fiction action. The premise followed a family of adventurers enhanced with bionic abilities after a near-fatal accident. Each member gained unique powers, turning them into a superhuman unit fighting evil forces. It was bold, stylish, and filled with dazzling animation far superior to most Saturday morning fare. But beneath the glossy surface lay some deeply unsettling undertones. The family's transformation came through painful surgery and the constant threat of malfunctioning cybernetics. Some episodes hinted at loss of humanity and the horrors of body modification themes far too dark for young viewers. Parents complained about the show's violence and emotional intensity. One storyline even involved the family's children facing death during missions. Critics questioned whether the program blurred the line between heroism and trauma. Behind the scenes, Bionic 6 was incredibly expensive to produce. The Japanese animation team delivered stunning visuals, but costs spiraled out of control. NBC executives began cutting episodes and marketing budgets. When ratings dipped, the show disappeared without ceremony. Yet decades later, it has become a cult favorite, praised for its mature storytelling and ahead of its time ideas. Bionic 6 was a glimpse into what animation could be if it dared to treat children as thinkers, not consumers, a risk few studios would ever take again.